I feel like one of the biggest complaints about comics in general has to be the fact that there really isn't much character growth on the heroes we know and love. And whenever new characters are introduced, if they aren't immediately a fan favorite, they're pretty much tossed to the side like Woody when Buzz Lightyear first appeared. And I recently saw another YouTuber named Natrix Nate talk about successors in comics, which made me think on the importance of growth for comic book characters. So shout out to Nate for that video, and let's get started on my ideas and how I feel about the comic book industry as a whole. So in this video, I'm definitely going to just pretty much sit around and kind of just talk or rant about how I feel when it comes to comic book successors. So I guess really it's important to define what is a successor. Now to me, I think a successor is someone who can pretty much handle the torch or take up the mantle for another esteemed hero that we know and love. One of the best examples of this is Wally West becoming the Flash. Heck, even Barry Allen becoming the Flash, because I mean, he wasn't even the first. I think DC has a pretty good job with successor characters compared to Marvel in that instance, but DC has their problems as well that we'll definitely get into. But when it comes to being a successor, it's really all about how you can carry on that mantle while also differentiating yourself. And I don't think that necessarily means that you have to take the name of that person or become the exact same hero. Like you don't have to become another Batman or another Superman. You can be your own person, but still hold the legacy or kind of the morality or characteristics that that person will strive for. And from what I've seen on the internet, a lot of people kind of have the same idea with me, but that's the problem with the comic book industry. We're kind of straying away from the whole idea of a successor, sort of. Like we get successor characters nowadays, but it's not really well received. And that's for one of two reasons, in my opinion. These comic book creators and writers and boardrooms just don't understand what we actually believe a successor should be, or the fact that us as fans aren't really gravitating or giving those characters a chance. And since at the end of the day, this is all a money industry, as soon as that character doesn't get a little bit of love off rip, they just get rid of them. I understand comics outside of like movies and animated series aren't really that popular nowadays, but it really does suck that we're getting a lot of new characters. And if they're just not like an instant Batman who laughs type of character, like where everyone is posting them on TikTok and creating these crazy theories and YouTube reels, well, Instagram reels and YouTube shorts about them, then it's pretty much just like, forget about them. We'll just move on to the next. And that brings me to the importance of creating a good legacy character and passing either the mantle or helping a younger hero grow. Another great example, again, from DC has to be Blue Beetle. Like you have Jaime Reyes, who is a Blue Beetle by name, and of course, the Scarab was involved with the previous successor of Blue Beetle, but he is vastly different from the other characters who held the same title. When you see like the latest Blue Beetle movie, they kind of mention Ted Kord and Kord Industries, but if you actually see what Ted Kord was like as Blue Beetle, and then you see Jaime Reyes, you're like, that's just like night and day. But both characters are equally interesting. I just wish Ted Kord got more storylines, but that's a whole different point. Blue Beetle, Jaime Reyes, arguably probably better than Ted Kord. And he has abilities and powers that makes him very different, but not just that. His background, his identity, how he acts as a hero is all vastly different. Yet at the same time, he really carries on the mantle of Blue Beetle very well. The other Blue Beetles definitely acknowledge him for his work. And he doesn't just say, forget the past. He goes to those people for inspiration and guidance and kind of like understanding on the type of hero he should be, how to better himself in this superhero world. And I think that's kind of the approach we need to take with a lot of these younger heroes. A lot of times we see these heroes introduced. One point example, like Miss Marvel, she's definitely a legacy type character for Captain Marvel. And I think when she was first introduced a few years ago, actually it's about a decade or so now. Wow, time is really flying by. But when she was first introduced in comics, I think Miss Marvel was a pretty interesting character. She definitely had powers that set her apart from Captain Marvel. And I like the idea that she was just pretty much a mega fan that became kind of a sidekick in a way. But as time went on, not only did Marvel not understand what they wanted to do with Captain Marvel and change her whole character identity a lot, but when it came to Miss Marvel, she pretty much is kind of just like shoehorned in as like, we need an extra female hero in these events, kind of throw her in to the point she died and no one really cared. And I think that kind of sucks when you have a character as interesting as Marvel on paper, who eventually just becomes kind of, just the filler death character to kind of get some shock value for a couple of issues. And it really sucks. But I think it's important that we start from protege to full-fledged hero. Now, Winter Soldier and Nightwing These are the best examples of this, in my opinion. These are proteges who grew to become their own hero, but never took the actual mantle of becoming a true successor, except for the time or a couple times at this point where Dick Grayson became Batman. But outside of that, he's mainly just Nightwing. He doesn't try to become Batman. However, he still carries on the legacy of the Bat family. Now you kind of see what I'm going with here, if you didn't already. At the end of the day, Bucky Barnes went from being a sidekick to his own hero, still carrying on the legacy of Captain America to the point, yeah, he was Captain America like super briefly. But at the end of the day, the real successor was someone like Sam Wilson. And going forward, we need to go back to that era of getting these younger heroes, prepping them up, giving them time to actually grow, build a fan base, become their own full-fledged hero, and then just carry on the legacy in other ways. So maybe one day we could have a new Iron Man, someone could take the mantle and actually become Iron Man. But it is nice to know that Iron Man can exist, and so can someone like Ironheart or Iron Lad. They don't have to just take Iron Man's name and just run with it. These people, heck, even War Machine, they can carry on the foundation of these heroes and still do their own thing. One example of this that I think could work and has worked, where someone has taken the mantle of a hero and kept the same name, is Miles Morales. He is Spider-Man. Now, his situation is a little bit different because initially he was from the Ultimate Universe. After the Spider-Man of his universe died, Miles eventually became Spider-Man, took on the mantle. So it's a little bit different because he's not from the same 616 universe that the main continuity is from. He's just a Spider-Man in a different universe that was doing his own thing, pun definitely intended, and eventually came in to the main universe. And now that he's there, there's no point of giving him another name. He was and is Spider-Man. So that's what he is. In this universe, he's Spider-Man. Now, whenever you read in his comics, it is differentiated by showing Miles Morales Spider-Man. Kind of lets you know that this is still Spider-Man, but this Spider-Man that we're looking at is Miles Morales, not the traditional Peter Parker. The only downside is it gets confusing, but at the end of the day, like once you're really into comics, you're pretty much a comic head at this point, you know Miles Morales is Spider-Man. Well, you know Miles Morales from Peter Parker. Man, I just messed that one up. But yeah, at the end of the day, they're both Spider-Man. They have vastly different suits and vastly different powers, but the identity on who Spider-Man is maintains the same. They even got that with Miguel O'Hara, who is Spider-Man. You've got Spider-Gwen. I mean, it just goes on to the point Spider-Man, Peter Parker has his own clones, also called Spider-Man or Scarlet Spider or whatever they're deciding to do for that title. But Miles Morales is a really good example of someone, instead of becoming like a Winter Soldier or a Nightwing, he just keep going on the same mantle. Peter Parker's still around. He's still Spider-Man, and so is Miles. And it's kind of weird because they're both in the same city dealing with separate problems sometimes. But at the end of the day, I think it works really well depending on the actual storylines involved, not the characters themselves. That goes to show how the importance of having a true successor is really hard to do. And the whole thing with Spider-Man Peter Parker is they planned on having him have a successor. I mean, at the end of the day, tried so many times to get rid of Peter Parker. I mean, you had the whole clone saga. You had Spider-Man 2099. These were all like characters who would take on the mantle and kind of leave Peter in the past. But Marvel Editorial has an idea that they don't like Peter for some reason, yet they keep him around. And when I say they don't like Peter, is more so they love Peter Parker and the amount of money he makes, but they treat him terribly in his comics to the point he has no character growth. It's almost like he needs a successor just so Peter Parker's legacy can remain intact, but they won't allow it to happen. Now it's to the point there's like 5 or 6 Spider-Men all running around in New York, and right now, Peter Parker isn't any of them. He's kind of just out there in limbo until they figure out what the heck they want to do with the character. And that's also the reason I think successors are important, because at the end of the day, I think eventually it's going to be about a time where we have to let our heroes be legacy characters. That's super controversial, I know. Peter Parker will always be Spider-Man, yes. And we'll always have Peter Parker as Spider-Man in some capacity. But if you guys can't figure out how to give this character interesting stories, then he'll never grow, and the audience will kind of lose the magic touch that we enjoyed or love about Peter Parker in the first place. It gets really tiring seeing Peter and MJ break up every 10 issues. And not only that, seeing Spider-Man, Peter Parker, the Spider-Man, deal with the same issues or pretty much problems that he's been having since his debut. Like, if you guys don't know what you want to do with this character, just let him stay retired, die, do whatever. even temporarily, because no one stays gone in comics. But just give him time to just rest and give these other characters times to step up and actually grow to love them. Even if we don't love them initially, I understand that, like I said, it's about money at the end of the day, but give us time to actually care about these characters. I can't just fully invest my time and love into a character after 6 issues, especially after I spent the last 25 years of my life loving Spider-Man Peter Parker. Like, you have to give me time to care about everyone else as well. That's when it comes to Peter Parker. I'm going to leave him alone a bit because I can make this a whole 2 hour plus video about how much I'm pretty much upset about the current state of Marvel Spider-Man comics outside the Ultimate Universe. So let's go ahead and talk about some good examples of a successor in comics. Starting with one of my favorite characters in all of comics, like I mentioned him before, let's bring in Dick Grayson Nightwing. Now, Nightwing, he's one of the greatest characters in all of DC, in my opinion. Now, Dick Grayson, he's one of the oldest heroes of all time. A lot of people don't talk about that. He's been around since pretty much a year after the debut of Batman. So he's been around since the early, 1930s, 1940s. And Nightwing, he's a character that was created later on. But after that, but before we got to the actual character Nightwing, Dick Grayson was Robin for a really long time. I mean, the name Robin was a name given to him by his own mother in the circus as an acrobat. And that kind of became a staple in comic book character history as who's going to be Batman's protege or sidekick Robin. And Nightwing was Dick Grayson's coming of age. He wanted to become his own hero. He literally separated himself from Batman. And him and Batman always had their issues because Bruce Wayne can definitely be kind of a jerk at times, but there's still love between the two characters at the end of the day. They have a father-son relationship. But Nightwing is kind of his own way of saying, you know what? I think the best thing for us as heroes and as a father and son is for us to separate but still be one. I'm going to become my own hero. Instead of being your sidekick, I'm going to be your partner. And I think Nightwing doing this was one of the best examples of a sidekick becoming their own hero alongside, Speedy or Red Arrow doing the same thing. And I think it was really well received and also just like a breath of fresh air for the character. He already was a leader by this point, leading the Teen Titans and doing his own thing with helping other heroes progress, younger heroes become better heroes in the long run. And I think him saying, you know what, we're going to leave this sidekick mantle behind, let's become my own hero. Sure, he could have done that as Robin to say, you know what, I'm just going to become Robin and be my own hero. But it wouldn't have been the same because Robin was already not just in universe associated with being Batman's sidekick, but with us as fans as well. Anytime we view Robin, we don't really think of him as his own hero. It's always like, cool, you're going to hold it down till Batman shows up, right? But no, he says, I'm going to be my own hero. And even though from time to time, Nightwing gets poorly written, but that's pretty much every superhero at this point. And he's kind of treated like kind of an afterthought, like, what are we going to do with Batman's storyline? Let's just throw some Nightwing in and fans love it. But in recent years, especially, we've been seeing a really good resurgence of Nightwing. I mean, not only did Tom Taylor have an amazing Nightwing run, but we also have Dan Waters picking it up, and everything I'm loving about it is great. We're kind of seeing Nightwing again become his own hero to the point he's been the leader of the Justice League multiple times. He's also, of course, led the Titans and helped other heroes, but he's also had one of the longest standalone runs in DC Comics. And it's really amazing to see how Dick Grayson as Robin has progressed so far throughout the years and has really matured into his own definitive hero. But another great example, I mean, with the recent Superman movie, we have to talk about Mr. Terrific. Now, Mr. Terrific hasn't always been super popular. If it wasn't for the Superman movie, we probably wouldn't be talking about him as much in 2025. But the fact that he's now in the limelight, a lot of people don't know that this Mr. Terrific is actually a successor to the original founding member of the JSA. And I'm not going to get too much into that person as a character since, one, I'm honestly not too familiar with them since I'm still reading through JSA myself, but also because it's really not that important about who the previous Mr. Terrific was, but the idea that this new hero takes on the mantle or the name of Mr. Terrific. The only thing that really stands out and that remains the same is the jacket that he wears, the fair play jacket. But besides that, and the characters being intelligent and smart, the new Mr. Terrific pretty much excels and is better than the previous in every way so far that I've seen. And I think that's a general consensus as well. And I would love to see just how much DC is going to do with him going forward. not only had him lead his own superhero team like the Terrifics, but you also see him as often referred to as the third or second strongest man in the DC universe. And he's getting a lot of love and shine recently. And I just can't wait to see what more is going to come from this. Because after the success of the Superman movie, I know we're definitely getting more of this character. And let's switch it up a little bit some more. Because when I think of good examples of a successor hero, you got to mention, I also said this is a character who has like a good legacy. And I think Daredevil, honestly, is one as well. Now, everybody associates Daredevil as Matt Murdock. But during the time when he was kind of, let's say, hiatus for spoiler purposes, Elektra stepped in and she was Daredevil for a while. And I think she did a phenomenal job as holding the title. He even had people that stand in, like Danny Rand was Daredevil for a little bit. That was more so just a stand-in type. He wasn't really trying to be a successor. He was just holding it down till Matt Murdock got back on his feet. But Elektra took on the name and the title, and she was Daredevil for quite a while, even having her own solo series as Daredevil. And I think it's really awesome to see how she went from kind of being just an assassin who's always thrown into random storylines, mainly dealing with Daredevil as his girlfriend slash enemy slash, whatever you want to make it be. And so eventually she gained a lot of development over years and years and years. So she took on the mantle for Daredevil during Matt's hardest time in his life. And she did it and kept the morals intact. I mean, Elektra is a stone cold assassin. She kills people and doesn't think twice about it most of the time. But she understands who Daredevil is, the perception of the name and title, and decides, you know what? People are going to know that I'm not the original Daredevil. I mean, I'm a woman. As soon as they see me, they're going to understand that. But the name Daredevil holds weight and is more important than the look or anything else associated with the hero. And if I truly care about Matt and his legacy, I have to uphold and maintain his ideals. So she did not kill. She stayed away from killing. She started to get away from using her size as much and started using other weapons more associated with Daredevil, since it will be easier to not harm or brutally kill people. And I do love how we see her have these moral conflictions, and to the point when Matt does return as Daredevil, she still holds the title as Daredevil as well. And now there's kind of like a Spider-Man situation where we have two Daredevils going around. She could go back to her Elektra name, and she kind of does that from here and there, but we often see her still hold on the name of Daredevil. And I honestly think on paper might not sound that great, but when it's executed very well, like it was with Chip Zdarsky's run, I think I really love this version of Elektra. And having her as Daredevil just goes to show that when you give a character enough time to breathe as the successor, they can not only become such a fascinating kind of component to that character's legacy, but also really go to show you that it's possible to continue to do this for other characters. At the end of the day, all this does is just come down to writing. How is this going to be written, and how well and how long it's going to be written? Because no one wants to have a successor character who's only going to be a successor for 6 to 12 issues. Like, you might as well just kept the original at that point. Understand in the Danny Rand situation, holding it down till they get back, that's really cool to see. But at the end of the day, if we're going to have a successor or someone to take on that mantle, that person has to be that character or be that hero for a while in order for us to be engaged. And you don't have to do exactly the exact same name and just keep them as, hey, I'm the new Batman or I'm the new Wonder Woman. No, just go ahead and give them a name that fits the character while still giving us an idea of, we know where you came from, and now we see where you are, and we know that that character's legacy is still going to move forward. And another person who I mentioned when I first started this video, the best example of this besides maybe Green Lantern, but that's a special case since there's an entire Lantern Corps, has to be the Flash. The Flash is without a doubt, I think, the greatest example of how to truly do a successor. I mean, it all started with Jay Garrick. You know, he was the fastest man alive, a scientist that became, the Flash. And we had him as the original Flash for quite some time until DC decided, we're going to move on from Jay Garrick, still keep him around as a legacy hero, but we're going to create a brand new Flash. Now, I don't know how it was perceived back then, but all I know is now, Barry Allen is often most people's favorite Flash. I mean, for the majority of my life, I would say Barry Allen was my favorite Flash. But in recent times, and by recent, I mean since 2023, Wally West has really made their resurgence for me. Now, we're not going to get into how Wally is portrayed nowadays in comics because I don't think they really know what they're doing with them. But prior to, I'll say, 2020, Wally West has been pretty much the definition of who the Flash is as a character. After Barry, let's just say, went away during the Crisis event, to avoid spoilers. But if you haven't known by now, it's been like, what, 40 years? But anyway, after the whole Barry Allen situation, Wally West took up on the mantle. He started off as Kid Flash. And I'm not going to lie, as I read further comics back and started to catch up from the past to the current state of Flash comics, I wasn't really a huge fan of Kid Flash, Wally West. You know, I felt like there was something missing about his character. And now that he became the Flash, I see what it was. It was identity. Even though he was a sidekick and he had sort of a different name, he didn't really have a way of being his own hero. And when he became the actual Flash, you would think is like, oh, well, he really doesn't have identity now because he's just taking the mantle of someone else that was already a hero to people at this point. But Wally West as a Flash has to be the best example of you are better than every successor in each way. I think every Flash up to Wally West got better than their predecessor, not only speed and power wise, but character wise. Like I love like Mark Waid's run on Wally West, even Jeff Johns' run on Wally West as a character. Like that character is so powerful, not only with his speed, but how he acts and how he treats the world and how he views society. And it's to the point people just said, you know what, we don't need Barry Allen back. And Barry was gone from comics on the most part all the way up until Flashpoint. And it's really awesome to see how a lot of people don't even realize that the character that they've kind of been looking up to with the Flash has been Wally West. Like I had a friend who didn't even realize that the Flash from the Justice League animated show was Wally West. He always said, yeah, Flash is my favorite hero or one of my favorite heroes. He's not super into comics like I am or maybe you are, but he's like, yeah, the Flash is one of my favorite characters. But the only Flash he ever knew was Barry Allen because he also watched the live action show. So he assumed that was just the same character. And I was like, oh, well, you realize that's Wally West, right? He's like, really? Like, that's Wally West? And I'm like, yeah, like that Flash that you love and care about the most from the animated show is actually the successor of Barry Allen. And after telling him that, he started to realize, like, wow, I always thought of Wally West as kind of like a filler or maybe an afterthought of a character and that Barry Allen is the definitive version. But after realizing that, you kind of see how Barry Allen and Wally West are really interchangeable in terms of being a hero. They're pretty much the exact same hero, but they're different people and different characters outside of the suit. And I think that's what makes the best version of a successor. Because even Bart Allen, Barry Allen's grandson, became the Flash at one point. And I think he was really awesome as the Flash as well. Not as interesting as Barry or Wally, but he also didn't have the mantle as long as them either. But I think he was also a really great successor to the role. And it leaves me realizing the Flash could do no wrong when it comes to that. That whole Flash family, just so well diverse, but so close with how their relationships are that it makes them as heroes even better. And it's to the point, if we got a new Flash character, I would be all for it. And it has to be done properly and introduced in the right way. But either way, I would definitely be in tune to check it out. And I think that's what's missing for a lot of these characters, because I've been talking about a lot of the good examples, but let's get into some of the bad. Starting off with Red Hood. Red Hood is an example of how you can do Nightwing, but poorly. Now, what I mean by that is Batman Under the Red Hood is probably my favorite superhero movie of all time. That is The Incredibles. I really love those two movies, watch them dozens and dozens of times. But outside of the Red Hood storyline, whether it's in comics or animation, Red Hood as a character has been pretty much ass. Yeah, when I say that he's been ass, I mean like just definitively. Like they don't know what they want to do with this character. Not only are they changing his look every pretty much 5 years and making him look worse and worse and worse, but his ideals, I get the fact that he's crazy, but why is he always switching up his morality like every other issue? Like either he's super evil or he's conflicted or he's the nicest guy in the world. Like we find a balance with him. And not only that, every continuity with him in it, whether it's Gotham Knights, even though that game is trash within itself, and then you have Red Hood and the Outlaws, or you have even Batman Hush 2. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that, but Red Hood in all of these different areas, or even Arkham Knight, is just like, okay, we're not talking about the origin of Red Hood. Everything after that is pretty much trash. And it sucks because I think Red Hood, on paper, is one of the most interesting Batman characters we've ever had. I mean, I'm not going to lie. As a kid, I thought he was the coolest looking Batman character. I'm like, dude, this is Batman with guns. Like, how can it get any better than this? But the more and more he started to become in comics, I realized they didn't know what the heck they wanted to do with this character. Like his progression has gotten so bad to the point even Red Hood fans are petitioning for him to just be redone or just to be cast aside as a character. Because it's like, okay, I love this character, but you're just ruining his legacy every other issue. Can we just figure out what we're gonna do with him before we keep going forward? It really sucks because I think he has the potential to be one of the standouts in the Bat family. You have other characters like Cassandra Cain or even Dick Grayson or Damian Wayne, and you see how far they progress. Then you look at Jason Todd. I mean, heck, even Tim Drake, he's kind of been stagnant as a character, but I will say at least he hasn't gotten worse than his character development. I think with Tim Drake, they just don't know what they want to do with him because they have so many Robins, and he kind of just is the least favorite, so he's just the least looked at. But Red Hood, Jason Todd, they just kind of throw his character into these storylines or put him in these positions to the point where all he does is just make himself look worse and make his ideals seem stupid. So I hope we get some better progression with him. I don't think it's too late at all by any means. I mean, all it really takes is just one good storyline, whether that's in a comic or introduction in a film, you name it. But if we get one good storyline with Red Hood, if just one good character design, please don't revert back to the recent design of this character is really, really, really bad. But if we get one definitive look for this character, we can just continue to go with forward. I think we're in for a really great character. Someone else who has a lot of love, I'm going to keep it brief because I've talked about him already, is Spider-Man. Spider-Man, he has a lot of successors. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, has a lot of successors. But Peter Parker himself has been one of the most bland and pretty much kind of unutilized characters in comics recently. I don't know if it's because Peter Parker has so many comics and so many storylines and so many issues out that they're not sure how to continue this character going forward, which is a whole other issue on why we should have a proper successor to give Peter Parker time to sit back and come up with better storylines for. But it could be a mix of that or the fact that Marvel editorial was just cooking these series out. Like, hey, we need a new Spider-Man like now to pay the bills. So let's just get something out on the way. That Joe Kelly has had a pretty good run so far, and I love Ultimate Spider-Man, but that version is, of course, different than the one we're used to. However, we're not going to talk about some of the infamous runs that have been going on recently with Zeb Wells. Let's just say, ever since Clone Saga, Peter Parker Spider-Man has kind of been off and on. He hasn't really figured out what he wants to do. The writers haven't figured out what they want to do with the character. There's been a lot of retconning. You have the infamous One More Day storyline. There's just so much going on with Peter Parker, Spider-Man, that it's to the point like, okay, what are we going to actually do with this guy? And I'm not a comic book writer myself, so I'm not going to say what they should or shouldn't do with Peter, but I will say a good idea would be to let the successors hold the mantle and just let Peter Parker slowly and slowly have less and less comics out. And I know that kind of sounds crazy because everyone loves a new Spider-Man that comes out. But once we read it, we realize it's hot garbage. We're like, okay, what are they doing? It's because they're overworking themselves with trying to make this character fit into the Marvel universe and give him consistent storylines. It's okay that maybe we can get less and less Peter Parker stories. Doesn't mean we have to kill him off or just say forget about him. But there are like 5 or 6 different Spider-Men out there. Let them get some shine. Let's grow to care and love those characters a lot more. I mean, they are, a lot of them, pretty much fan favorites at this point. But Yellow Hera, Ben Reilly, Miles Morales, I mean, these are loved characters already. So it's not really much to just give us more of them. But let's give Peter Parker some time for them to figure out what we're going to do. Because I swear, if we get another Peter Parker and Mary Jane marriage and breakup storyline, I'm going to lose my shit. But besides Peter Parker and Spider-Man, we also have a really, really bad example of Wolverine. I don't know if I'm the only one noticing this, but Wolverine has been really stagnant. Not only does he have one of the worst Ultimate comics out right now, in my opinion, but just his regular storylines haven't been all that. I don't know if it's because he's pretty much been kind of in the same boat as Spider-Man to where he's been written in so many comics and stories that they're not sure what to do with this guy. I mean, Wolverine does have a successor. You got X-23 who becomes Wolverine, even though a lot of people feel kind of off and on about her as that mantle. I think it's well-deserved and that she should be the new Wolverine. But we're talking about Logan here. And Logan is one of those characters, they're not really sure what to do with him either. I mean, he keeps dying and coming back. I know that's kind of his whole thing is that he can't die, but they're definitively trying to kill this guy off a whole lot. And I know that's pretty much every comic book character, But it's to the point I'm kind of starting to see the pattern like, all right, well, what are we going to do with Wolverine? Is he going to be a professor of a school? Is he going to be a mutant vigilante? Is he going to be the super bad guy or kind of like the guy in the gray in the middle? I don't know. Is he the liaison between the X-Men and the Avengers? Like, who knows at this point? And it's kind of gotten to the point where he's pretty much stagnant. You aren't really seeing as much Wolverine of late. Aside from the Krakoa arc, with Wolverine having his whole situation with Sabretooth and the Sabretooth War, which actually was pretty phenomenal in my opinion. But besides from that, you haven't really been seeing much Wolverine. And I think that's intentional. It's because they started to realize we need to pull back a little bit on this guy because a lot of his storylines are getting pretty much redundant as we have to come up with some new material for him. Whether that's new villains for him to face or just give someone else the mantle. It doesn't have to be someone else becoming Wolverine, but maybe someone else that can just carry on the legacy of who Wolverine is and his stories to give us a pretty cool character to kind of see the forefront of going forward. The other character who I wanted to mention doesn't necessarily need a successor, but I felt like their stories have been really, really stagnant is Cyborg. Now, Cyborg has been stuck in a loop of character growth, or no character growth, I should say, for a really long time. Besides his identity of being the tech guy in either the Teen Titans or the Justice League, there's not much to go from there. I mean, he hasn't had any solo runs in a really long time, if ever. I can't remember the time I've actually read a Cyborg solo story, but Cyborg has always just been that guy in other people's work. And, he's been consistent at least. He's been consistent as a character. But besides him becoming a cyborg and the whole situation with him and his father, he doesn't have any really interesting storylines, sad to say. If it doesn't involve the team or the rest of the group and his relationship with them, he's kind of just stagnant. And I think Cyborg has a lot of potential to be a really cool character. I think if he's really properly introduced in a movie, we're not going to count the whole Zack Snyder Justice League crap. Even though I love his version of that movie, we're not going to talk about all that because there's just a lot of things going on behind the scene for better and for worse. Some of it is just out of Zack Snyder's control, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, dealing with that character it wasn't portrayed well on the screen for the first time. But I think with this new DCU and the way things are going, if he get introduced or properly introduced as a cyborg, I think he can make a really compelling and good character. And if he is pretty much well received, similar to Mr. Terrific, we could finally see a cyborg series take off. Maybe new storylines with this character where he's actually doing something compelling and worth mentioning. Because besides that, I think he doesn't necessarily need a successor. I think he has to become his own successor at this point. It's to the point that this new cyborg has to just become a better version than the previous ones have, or he's just going to continue to be in that limbo of a character. And I hate to see that for someone that's really awesome. But I want to end off the last character I want to talk about today. Has to be Wonder Woman. Now, Diana Prince. I think she has successors to a degree. I mean, you have Wonder Girl, and I think that she does need a proper successor, but that doesn't necessarily mean Diana as a character has to die off or disappear. I think it needs to be something kind of in the realm of Nightwing and Batman, that maybe Wonder Girl, maybe a new character, will step in as her sidekick or protege and eventually leave off to become their own hero. That way we can get Diana as Wonder Woman, also someone else as her own hero on the side that can kind of give us that moral duality between the two. To show this is something that Wonder Woman accomplished. Her greatest contribution to the comic industry could be her creating another female superhero as iconic as her. And I think that would be really awesome to see. Because when you think about successors, even Superman has one. I mean, you have Supergirl. I mean, Superman also has his own son who carries the same title as Superman, which I'm not really into Jonathan Kent as much. I think he's fine, but I'm not into him as much. However, I think Supergirl is a lot better of a character as a successor for him. And you even have characters like Steel, who I think is really good. And Superman has done it. Batman has done it. I think it's about time that the last member of the Trinity, Wonder Woman, gets it. Because we're being honest, she hasn't had any really good stories in a long time. I actually love Absolute Wonder Woman. It's actually my favorite of the Absolute series so far. That and Martian Manhunter. But I think the traditional or the main continuity of Wonder Woman has been really stagnant for a very long time. And the recent run has done nothing but pretty much negative complaints about it. And I think the best thing they can do for Diana is say, you know what? Let's give her a sidekick, a definitive sidekick. Maybe we can, like I said, bring Wonder Girl back and give Diana someone to work and pour her energy and her kind of talents into. And in time, we could see this successor not only grow to become their own person, but we can see what type of person Diana becomes after training them to be the best version of themselves. And that can give us some really cool storylines to go with as well, and give us something with the character that is actually fresh and new and unique. So again, I have to reiterate why this is more important than ever for comic books to kind of build these legacy characters up and create successors is that we want comics to be around for a long time. I don't know about you guys, but I love comics. I've been here on this earth for 25 years, and I want comics in my life for another 25 if possible. And I know things are kind of shifting and gearing towards on the big screen, which I'm all for, but I really want these comic book storylines to kind of build up and progress as well. It's kind of disheartening when you see a lot of your fan favorite heroes kind of just have boring or bland stories. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with they're not sure what to do with these characters going forward, or what to do with their sidekicks, or what to do with anybody that's in relation to them. To the point you have Peter Parker and MJ situations going on every 2 weeks in these other comics as well. You have these characters just kind of repeating storylines over and over and over again. And it's gotten to the point the characters themselves aren't getting any growth, and none of the new heroes are getting any spotlight as well. Now, these storylines are becoming dull. I think it's up to us as fans to support and vocalize this, because all this is about money. At the end of the day, if they don't have the funds to cover it, they're going to have to, make some pretty trash stories or just give us another Spider-Man title along the way to kind of keep the budget up. And we have to support these comics and also understand when they're introducing these new characters, let's give them time to breathe. These characters, let's show them love and appreciation for them. If the character isn't introduced in the best light, that's totally fine. Let's not bash them or just forget about their character. Let's give them time to say, you know what? I don't love everything about this character yet, but I can if you give me more of them, more compelling reasons to care about these characters. And if we get that, then we're going to see a whole new, brand new wave of new heroes. And I think that's something the comic book industry desperately needs. So go ahead, comment down below, who is your favorite successor in comics and a character you would like to see more appreciated than ever before. Because once again, my name is Keith with everything about comics here on this channel. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like and a thumbs up and check out some more videos on the channel, because I promise you don't want to miss what's coming next.